Hello, I'm Chris Eddy. Welcome to VLGA Connect, brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, our weekly look at the latest news, interviews and discussions of importance and interest to the local government sector in Victoria. Coming up today on the program, the CEO of Hepburn Shire Council is here, Bradley Thomas, to explain his council's decision to seek a higher rate cap this year. And Tony Raunic joins me later in the show. Tony, of course, from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. We'll be looking at that situation that's rapidly developing in Whittlesea and the Monitors report that has recently been released for Buloke Shire Council. So all of that coming up. But first, let's update you on the latest news with Connect News. Whittlesea Mayor Aidan McClendon has reportedly been banned from attending council premises and must participate in meetings remotely due to allegations of aggressive behaviour and intimidating conduct towards staff and councillors. The Herald Sun and The Age refer to confidential letters in which the council's CEO Craig Lloyd cites concerns about staff safety, intimidation of councillors and alleged leaking of confidential information. Councillor McClendon denies the allegations, telling 7 News last night that he's the people's mayor and he's not going anywhere. More on that later this episode with Tony Raunic. Another Melbourne council is moving its latest meeting online over safety concerns. Casey Mayor Stephen Cooman announced that the March meeting will be held online on advice from Victoria Police. He said after disruptions to the February meeting, which saw the meeting adjourned and police called, individuals were again planning to disrupt the council's next meeting. The council says police are continuing to investigate a small group of people that are using threatening and violent language online toward council and councillors. Earlier this week, Greater Dandenong Council conducted its meeting in a hybrid online format, with about half of the councillors choosing to participate from home. The decision to hold that meeting online was also due to safety concerns after threats of violence were made online over a contentious renaming proposal. Hepburn Shire Council will seek approval for a significant rate increase to shore up its financial position. The council will ask the ESC to approve a 10% rate increase next financial year, 7% above the state-mandated cap. The Mayor, Don Henderson, says the average impact would be $2.20 per property per week, generating $1.36 million for essential services. CEO Bradley Thomas joins us shortly to discuss the council's financial position and why it's taking this move. The City of Yarra has voted to increase daily permit fees for e-scooter companies by 400%. Under the new scheme, companies like Lime and Neuron will see their per-scooter fees jump from $1 to $5 daily as the council moves to turn a loss-making trial into a revenue-positive venture. The Mayor, Stephen Jolly, said Yarra ratepayers should not have to pick up the tab for 2 very large and profitable multinational companies. An alliance of outer Melbourne councils is putting the spotlight on the lack of essential community facilities like swimming pools and libraries while they deal with rapid population growth. The Outer Melbourne Councils group says local councils are unable to fund the facilities independently and is calling for a fair split across all levels of government. 5 southeast Victorian councils, including Mornington Peninsula and Bass Coast, have formed a working group to address high drowning rates in their regions. There were 54 drownings on the Mornington Peninsula in the 10 years to 2024, 9 times the Victorian average. Casey, Cardinia and Greater Dandenong are also part of the alliance, working with Lifesaving Victoria to tackle the problem. And 5 councils in the northwest of the state have formed an alliance to deal with impacts on their communities from transmission lines, renewable energy and mining. Councillors and CEOs from Buloke, Gannawarra, Loddon, Northern Grampians and Yarriambiack met in Charlton last week to discuss the common issues across council borders. And Golden Plains Shire Council has appointed Stephen Sagona as its new interim CEO, following the resignation recently of Shane Walden. Mr Sagona brings 30 years of local government experience to the role, including previous roles at Golden Plains and most recently at Hobson's Bay. That's the latest Connect news for now. Listen to the Local Government News Roundup podcast 3 times a week for the latest sector news and interviews from across Australia and beyond. I'm joined by Bradley Thomas, the CEO of Hepburn Shire Council, which has announced this week that it's going to seek a higher rate cap, 10%, 7% on top of the rate cap of 3%. Bradley, big decision for the council. Can you tell us how you've gone about reaching this point?
No, thanks for having me, Chris, and I'm happy to be here and provide some insight. So certainly, probably an 18-month to 2-year process and a fair bit of detail, particularly with the previous councillor group. And we've got lots of reasons and happy to go into them in terms of why we're in a particular financial challenge that we are.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we did a lot of workshops with councillors last term, looking through the various options that we have. So revenue and rates and user fees, grants, borrowings, services, capital works. But ultimately, we need to find $4 million a year going forward and over the 10 years to be financially sustainable. And 4 million really in the context of about a $45 million budget. So quite significant.
Pretty big, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, no, it is. We're not
Yeah.
talking, and we've done lots of work over the years around trimming services, looking for efficiencies, reducing any fat. Like we're a very, very lean organisation. So there just hasn't. We've made those savings in the past over the last decade. They don't exist.
And you've found a 1.5 million, I understand, this financial year. Where has that come from?
Yeah, so just to sort of to really move the process forward, $1.5 million of savings this year, and we split that up into about 900,000 in staff vacancies or roles. So we've had reductions in roles, and about 600,000 in sort of maintenance, consultants, contractors, and other things. So we've had to make some really significant decisions around service delivery. So two in particular that jump out are things like we operate 4 libraries here at Hepburn Shire across our 4 major towns. They've traditionally been opened a mix of days, but particularly all 4 have been open on a Saturday morning. We just can't afford that going forward. So we went through a process. We looked at where our biggest numbers were. And so 2 of the 4 libraries now don't open on a Saturday. We did similar with our swimming pools, 3 outdoor seasonal swimming pools. Traditionally, over the summer period, open 7 days a week. We just couldn't afford that going forward. So we've actually put in place the reduced opening hours and only open 5 out of the 7 days.
Right.
So we've looked at where we can reduce some of the services to reduce some of those costs. There's been some positions that we've fully taken out of the organisation. I've done a bit of a realignment 12, 18 months ago and reducing some of our senior management as well as we tried to find that $1.5 million this year.
Right. And we know pools are very costly to operate, of course, but they're permanent savings you've described there. You say even with the higher rate cap, and I'll come back to that community response in a moment, that you still need to find another $2.6 million in savings. That's annually?
Yeah, annually and permanently. So yeah, on top of the about the 1.3 million that we would generate from the rate cap if successful, we're looking at 2.6 million of permanent ongoing operational services. So doing lots of work at the moment with councillors in relation to the council plan and the budget. So we've committed to effectively wanting to have our council plan and budget lined up and in place by the 30th of June. And that's where we'll go back out to the community and say, okay, yep, on top of the rate cap, we do have to have that reductions of services. And to be fair, we're looking right across the board. And there'll be some unpopular decisions made. I've got no doubt about that. But ultimately, we've got to find this funding to make sure that we're sustainable as an organisation going forward.
It begs the question, Bradley, how it's gotten to this point. What do you think is the root cause of being in this situation where you've got to find so many savings?
Yeah, so great question. We've probably reflected a bit on that. And I think ultimately it's not one thing. I think if it had been one thing, you'd put a solution in place for that and you move forward. So some of the things that are particularly impacted here at Hepburn, small rural council, limited access to alternative revenue streams absolutely has an impact. We don't have a major base. So we sort of have 4 major towns, Creswick, Dalesford, Trentham and Clunes, but there's not that one that we can have, I suppose, that centralisation of services. So we've got 4 libraries, whereas some other councils can have that consolidation of revenue. We're a low rating council. At amalgamation, when all councils came together, Hepburn Shire was actually the 2nd lowest rates of any municipality in Victoria. And so you've had that low base and low income for a long period of time. And even if the machinations of rate increases since then and the rate cap, we're still the 60th out of the 79 councils in terms of a low base. And it has a massive impact. Like even if we just came up to being an average rates council, it's about a bit over $2 million for us each year. So you throw that dispersed services, low revenue base, a really engaged community, a community and a councillor group that has wanted to probably deliver a whole range of services and capital works, maybe a little bit outside our means over the last 5, 10 years. And this is
Right.
part of, okay, what's the solution moving forward?
That cumulative impact can't be overstated, can it? Particularly, people have been talking about that since the rate cap first came in. Community response. I know you tested this last year, as you've outlined briefly, but you made the announcement this week of your intentions, and I imagine you've already copped some backlash.
Yeah, a little bit, and not unsurprisingly, and we get that and understand that. It's not popular, and if we had some other alternative options, and I hopefully both community and the sector can see, we've looked at all the other options and we're putting them into place as well. We've got taken some borrowings out as well. So when we did the community engagement and ultimately adopted our financial vision, which is our roadmap for the next 10 years back in September, we did a lot of community engagement back then. And that's what also gave us the impetus and council decision around that our community wanted to keep some services and could understand that there would need to be a rate cap component. So 61% of people that were part of that engagement back in sort of August, September, said that they would be okay with a form of rate cap above, rate rises above the rate cap. And so that ultimately that was where council sat and adopted. Since then, we've been working on the submission to the ESC. There's a lot of work that goes in it. We made the decision to basically do all of that work in-house. Two parts. We think we know we understand the organisation and community better than bringing an external consultant in. And to be fair, we don't have the money to put into a nice submission. So officers have been doing a heck of a lot of work. We've got to the stage that we submitted last week to the ESC. It's been made public now. And so we'll work with the ESC. The last 24 hours, absolutely, there's been, as we'd expect, some commentary on social media, some upset at the rate rise. Is this due to mismanagement? Why are we doing this now? Whole range of comments. We understand that and accept that, and that's part of being community facing and some parts of the social media. We've been really clear to tell that story, and we hope that as people understand the history and where we are currently and what we want to do going forward, people will understand a little bit more about the process. We'll work with the ESC. Ultimately, they're the independent adjudicator. They'll come back to us and say whether they agree with us, and then we'll move forward into the budget process.
If they don't agree, if they say no, what's your plan B?
No, good. Yeah. So I suppose ultimately we still got to find that $4 million.
Yeah.
So we would go back to councillors around what are the other levers that you want to pull. And when I say we're already pulling, we've reduced our capital works basically back to renewal only. We've got the $2.6 million of savings. We've already taken borrowings out. So it's fair to say whatever we don't get in the rate cap is likely to come from additional service cuts.
Yeah.
So the 2.6 in a worst case scenario for us would have to become $4 million. And that's why I think we showed a real balance between going the rate cap request option is almost our last component while we're still doing all the other efficiency work.
So I think you're the only one that's applied so far. I know Alpine was talking about applying on the basis of moving revenue from the waste management charge into general revenue, but we've had a few years now of no council seeking a higher rate cap, so this could be the start of a new move towards, as we've seen in New South Wales, trying to counter the financial challenges that the sector has.
Oh, absolutely. And I suppose someone's got to be the first to do it in a while. And we're coming, let's be honest, we're coming off the back of some really tough years in terms of COVID and
Yeah.
bits and pieces where councils offered so much support to community around capacity to pay. But you've got a state government inquiry there's a federal government inquiry. You've got almost all 79 councils saying our finances are a massive challenge. And so councils are cutting services, looking for efficiencies, looking at things like shared services, hopefully taking a longer term approach and not just cutting capital works because you don't sort of see it this year and that process. So The rate cap variation is there. Government has said that it's a legitimate source. Once you've been through a process to sort of do the engagement, look at all the other levers. I feel really confident, as I said, over that 2-year piece of work, we've lifted every lid in terms of where there could be savings and looking at doing things differently. That doesn't stop. We will continue to do that. Love having conversations with councils around opportunities to partner and do stuff together. But if we don't make a really significant change, I worry about those reductions in services. And when we're already talking cuts to libraries and pools and staffing numbers, these are core services that councils have been able to deliver in Victoria for a decade, and it's not getting easier. And we see this as a really legitimate option going forward.
Challenging environment indeed. So it sounds like a thorough process. So I wish you well with that process. I think we will know by around the end of April when the ESC makes its determination. You mentioned partnering with councils. Just very quickly, congratulations on the work you're doing with Mount Alexander on building services. We spoke about that on the program a couple of weeks ago. Great initiative. Good to see. Hope there's more of it.
Thank you. Yep. Always happy to have a conversation with any council around how we can work together.
Bradley Thomas, CEO of Hepburn Shire, thanks for coming on VLGA Connect.
Cheers, Chris. Appreciate it.
Time now to bring in Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Hello, Tony. How have you been?
Really well, Chris. Really well. We're in March already, Chris, and it's nearly
Crazy.
finished. It's crazy. I'm getting used to writing 25, and yeah, we're a quarter in, but a quarter full of council stories and more this week.
Yeah, it doesn't stop, does it? So there's two things we want to focus on this week. I mean, the story we can't ignore. It's been all over the dailies. It was on 7 News last night. The People's Mayor, as he calls himself, Aidan McClendon, he's been banned from attending the council office at Whittlesea and has to attend meetings online due to a ruling, if you like, that's been made by the council CEO. I'm keen to understand, without going to the details of alleged behaviour and conduct, etc., the process involved here, Tony, and the ability, the power of the CEO to take this sort of action. What jumps out at you?
Yeah, well, what immediately jumps out is that this is an extraordinary situation, Chris, and I think unprecedented in terms of executive measures against a sitting mayor.
I would have thought so, yeah.
Yeah, we've certainly heard of measures against particular councillors over the time, and there's certainly no doubt, Chris, that the CEO of a council has some powers, indeed obligations, under occupational health and safety legislation to provide a safe workplace for council staff and arguably also for councillors. And there's no doubt that that is often or regularly is utilised to bring in measures that control the interactions of a councillor with council staff.
Yeah.
Often temporary measures, and in this case, again, it's some measures that were implemented, I think, for a 4-week period with a review to occur.
Tony, before you go on, I think it's important for us to say that our understanding of this is based on confidential letters that are stamped confidential, that have clearly been leaked to the media. And look, to be honest, they're circulating quite widely in local government circles, but they are stamped confidential. So can we just deal with that issue first?
Yeah.
Are they truly confidential?
Well, short answer from mine is I doubt very much that they are. I don't think they would meet the definition of confidential information in the Local Government Act. There's specific areas in that section, or specific elements in that section that make out the definition of confidential information, and I don't think this falls within that at all. But you're right. Most of us have seen those letters. They've been widely circulated, and The Age has reported on that this week.
Yes.
You mentioned the process. What appears to have happened is there's been 2 pieces of correspondence from the CEO, one in the form of like a warning letter, and then about a fortnight later, a letter saying, look, I'm implementing certain measures because the behaviour hasn't ceased. The warning letter cited, I think, various classes of staff and councillors that were feeling aggrieved, offended, even pain and confusion, I think were words like that, from commentary by the mayor, and then and concluded, with a warning, for the mayor to cease the offensive behaviour, or the CEO would have to introduce stronger measures. The next letter has introduced those measures, and as you say, measures that are quite extraordinary, and would indeed clearly would constrain the mayor in their role at fulfilling their role as a councillor and a mayor. So measures that are requiring, as you say, the mayor to only attend council meetings, briefings, meetings where he's a representative of council on committees via virtual means online.
Yeah.
A requirement that the mayor only contact his fellow council law colleagues via email, so through his official council email account, so don't contact them directly by phone, by text, in person, and a measure prohibiting the mayor from contacting any council officer other than through those online attendance at meetings, with the exception being the CEO,
Yeah.
but with whom he's only to communicate through the council email account. So there's some more nuances there, but that's what we understand the measures are. So clearly very significant measures, and as I say, would have a major impact on the way the mayor's able to carry out the mayoral role, indeed the councillor role.
Quite extraordinary, as you say. Aidan McClendon was on 7 News last night, described himself as the people's mayor, said he's not going anywhere, and he did talk about those constraints on him to do his role. Where do you think this ends up, really, in the longer run?
Yeah, look. I think this is for quite some time. I think since early February even has been destined for a arbitration hearing through the code of conduct processes, because Councillor McClendon's colleagues have referred him to one of those processes, and I think that's the forum that will examine whether Councillor McClendon's commentary has breached the model code of conduct. There is this tension, and we've talked about it before, but there is this tension between the CEO's responsibility to provide a safe working environment, but also recognising that we have an elected official here in a democracy, and they are being significantly constrained from carrying out their elected role. I think it's best resolved in the arbitration hearing, and where there'll be a finding as to whether the mayor's commentary actions have in any way breached the model code of conduct. And and I think that's the best way for this process to be resolved.
All right, so we'll have to wait and see how that plays out. That could take some time. I understand that the CEO's letter had a review milestone in about a month. I think that's coming up in about 10 days or so. So we'll wait and see whether anything changes there. Thanks for your thoughts on that, Tony. The other one we wanted to touch on before more of these drop, we've got a number of monitors appointments that have recently concluded around the state. The Buloke one, which concluded late last year, the monitors report has been published. You've had a look for any relevant takeaways for the sector here?
Yeah, I have. So yeah, Peter Harriott, of course, appointed in May last year, and I think till the end of the 2024 year, with the usual sort of terms of reference. But what jumped out for me was that, well, firstly, it's a pretty unique place, Buloke, and the report does comment on that it's a relatively small population, very big land area. Really high asset valuation, which is mainly these roads which service the farmlands, basically bringing crops to transport hubs, and that's creates a very great burden on the council in terms of maintaining these assets. And we know that Buloke has struggled in the past financially. Back in 2012 was in some financial distress, but from the Monitor's report, it seems that in a much stronger financial position currently. But there are some ongoing issues that jumped out for me, Chris. The Monitor mentioned the reluctance of councillors to move away from, raising the operational matters at council meetings. And indeed, I participated, provided some induction training for Buloke councillors this term. This is certainly something we spoke about. Another issue was this desire for the current crop of councillors to maintain this councillor question time element of the council meeting, which is not for the councillors to receive questions, but for the councillors to ask questions of the officers, which can lead to a bit of a, berating session. And we do know that there's a high level of staff turnover there at Buloke. Another practical point the Monitor raised was just the timing of council meetings. This is, as I said, a big municipality with meetings starting in the evenings and finishing late in the evenings. Councillors, council staff are driving long distances on, country roads, avoiding potholes and kangaroos, these sorts of very practical issues. And the notion that council might consider moving the timing of the meeting to earlier in the day, and that's been resisted, I understand, up till now. And again, just something that is across the sector, just as an observation the Monitor made, is that council behaviour does impact on staff morale, which impacts on staff retention rates. And there is this vicious circle we've spoken about where councillors, I get it, come in and say, we're really concerned about how long it takes for operational things to get done, for residents to get answers from staff to their questions. But then in perhaps, seeking answers to why that's the case, councillors can sometimes appear to be highly critical of the staff, which leads to reduced staff morale, which leads to staff leaving and lower retention rates, which makes the problem worse in that it takes even longer for responses. So
exactly.
we have this vicious cycle. Finally, Chris, something that the Monitor was quite pointed about, I think, was saying, look, there needs to be an assessment of the efficiency of a shire like Buloke running 4 council office sites and 5 depot sites. And I understand that there's the geographic spread and that would be a factor in having these multiple sites, but it clearly is creates a drain on efficiency and financial resources. And there might need to be some tough decisions. And the Monitor, I think, highlighted one value of the councillors, which I thought was interesting, and that was the key value was having the courage to stand up for what is right and inspire others to value integrity and respect. And I think it's just having some tough decisions to be made in that municipality. And I really feel for the councillors and the council staff. But this while the council's in a stronger financial position now, clearly there is there is concerns for that council over the longer term in terms of its ability to maintain that position.
Some of those themes that have come out would certainly resonate with other councils, particularly small rural councils around the state. I noticed that the Monitor has suggested to the Minister that the CEO needs some avenue to be able to report persistent inappropriate behaviour by councillors. That's an interesting one, bit of a slippery slope potentially, but at the moment a CEO doesn't really have the ability to do that, do they?
Yeah. And what I liked was the Monitor suggestion that it be reporting to the local government inspectorate. So it didn't seem to be the CEO being a party to conduct proceedings, which I think have been suggested in the past,
Right.
and I wouldn't support. But the notion of being able to report matters to the inspectorate, frankly, I thought anyone could probably do that anyway. But
Yeah.
having a formal process for a CEO to do that, I think it would be valuable.
So this report's been published. I don't believe there's been any response from the minister. Not sure if we're expecting that there will be, but as I said earlier, there are some other monitors' reports in the pipeline that haven't yet been published. So we're expecting, I guess, at some point to see more of those to analyse in the not too distant future, Tony.
It'll be interesting reading for all of us.
It will. Tony, thank you for those thoughts on both that and on the Whittlesea situation, which is developing by the day, it seems. So no doubt we'll come back and talk more on that in the weeks ahead. Great to have you back on VLGA Connect.
Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers with us on today's edition of VLGA Connect. And that's all we have for you this week. Thank you for joining us. Hope you'll be back with us next week on YouTube and podcasts for all the latest news and some more interesting interviews with people from across the sector in Victoria. Until then, bye for now.